Today's question relates to the fight against impunity and whether it has been living up to the Nuremberg Principles. And from the substance standpoint, we will continue discussing the correlated and related challenges to the fight against impunity and accountability efforts and accountability framework. But before we start the more substantive discussion in the afternoon, it is our great pleasure to partner with the Memorium Nuremberg Trials and present a side event reflecting on the historical importance and presenting the Courtroom 600. The Memorium Nuremberg Trials is an information and documentation center located on the top floor of the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, just about Courtroom 600, the historic side event of the Nuremberg Trials. We have, from the organizational perspective, avoided touching upon the historical significance of Courtroom 600 much. And we are very privileged to have with us today two prominent experts who will shed some light on the Courtroom 600. We have two speakers today. We have Professor Dr. Manuel Baumann, who is the director of the Memorium Nuremberg Trials. He has worked previously as a research assistant for history mediation and worked at the Martin Luther University Halle Wittenberg researching the aftermath of National Socialism in the Federal Criminal Police Office. From 2005 to 2009, he was the personal advisor to the director of the Buchenwald and Mittelbau Dora Memorials Foundation. From 2007 to 2009, he was also the foundation's head of press and public relations. From 2001 to 2004, he was a research associate at the Albert Ludwig University of Freiburg. Welcome, Dr. Baumann. It's a great pleasure having you with us today. I will also introduce the second expert, who is Mr. Axel Fischer, a research specialist at the Memorium Nuremberg Trials. Mr. Fischer specializes in media and literature studies after having been employed in the fields of marketing, public relations, and culture management. He then became a research fellow at the University of Wuppertal and Marburg. He is member of the International Research and Documentation Center for War Crimes Trials at the University of Marburg, and has been engaged with the film footage produced on the occasion of the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg since 2010. Since February 2012, he has been responsible for the project, the United States American Film Project on the Nuremberg Trials, a contribution to the political culture of post-war Germany. Thank you very much both for joining us today. And I will give the floor to Dr. Baumann.
Thank you very much, Jolana. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Manuel Baumann. I've been director of the Memorium Nuremberg Trials since April 2021. I hope you've had interesting discussions so far during the forum this year. And it's my pleasure today to introduce you to the morning side event, which is closely connected with the Memorium Nuremberg Trials. This is the municipal museum established in 2010. As Jolana already mentioned, we are located in the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, and we have about 100,000 visitors in a year from all over the world. 2 weeks ago, we all remembered a very special event. 75 years ago, the main war criminals of Nazi Germany were sentenced in Courtroom 600. With this sentencing, the Allies held true to their promise to leave none of the most serious Nazi-stain crimes against humanity unpunished. The perpetrators were held to account before an international criminal court. In Courtroom 600 stood the cradle of international criminal law. In our museum, we deal with the history of this trial, its historical impact, and the meaning of the Nuremberg trials today. We regret that we are once again unable to visit the Courtroom 600 physically this year. Nonetheless, I'm very pleased that we are now able to offer a unique digital tour through Courtroom 600 which is a special presentation created by my colleagues Axel Fischer and Rebecca Weiss. And Axel himself will now present you the guided tour, and he'll be happy to answer all your questions afterwards. And now I will hand it over to you, Axel.
So here we are. Yeah, also from me a warm welcome here in quite foggy and cold November. That is maybe the advantage of only traveling virtually, that you don't have to experience this autumn weather here in Germany. Nevertheless, we would have been very, very happy if we could have welcome you here in person in the Courtroom 600, and we are looking forward that this will be possible again in the future as we did in the past. Nevertheless, this presentation by me has two aims. The first aim is to show you around in Courtroom 600, to explain to you how this courtroom was changed for the conduct of the international trial here, and then rechanged after it was returned to the Bavarian judiciary. This is the first purpose. And the second purpose is to make you familiar with this tool that we have created. Dr. Baumann also already mentioned it. We have created in the times of Corona a virtual visit tool that enables our visitors who cannot come here physically to at least visit the courtroom via a 360-degree panorama. I will give a short introduction into the historic events that took place here and that makes this place so significant. And then I will give you a short guided tour through this courtroom. Through this courtroom that is, some call it the birthplace, some call it the cradle of international criminal law. I would argue rather for the term cradle of international criminal law, as the legal basis was issued in London, the London Charter, the London Agreement in August 1945, but nevertheless, the first international trial to conduct, to practice international criminal law took place here in this very courtroom that you see in my back. The first trial, or let's start it differently. From 1945 to 1949, there were 13 trials in total held here in this Palace of Justice in Nuremberg in the aftermath of the Second World War. That was one international trial, the International Military Tribunal, conducted by the Soviet Union, the United States of America, France, and Great Britain from November 1945 to October 1946. And then there were subsequently 12 other trials, US military trials, that lasted from late October 1946 to April 1949. The basis of the first trial, the legal basis of the International Military Tribunal was a real international state treaty. A state treaty first between Soviet Union, USA, Great Britain, and France, who later was also signed by 19 other states. States like Yugoslavia, Belgium, the Netherlands, for example, who were also victims of the German aggression, but also by other states like Haiti or Venezuela. These states more or less joined within the framework of the founding of the United Nations. So it was a real international movement that was the basis for this trial here in Nuremberg. The legal basis for the following trials, for the 12 other trials that were conducted here by US military courts, was also an international treaty. It was the so-called Control Council Law Number 10, issued by the four allies in the Allied Control Council in Potsdam near Berlin in December 1945. a few months before the international trial had ended. The International Military Tribunal, or the legal basis for the International Military Tribunal, defined 3 crimes. These were crime of aggression, or as it was called at that time, crime against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So the crimes that we still would call the core crimes of international law today. So the name Cradle of International Criminal Law is not a false term to describe this place. So then, yeah, I'd like to take you into this place. And I'd like to, yeah, thank you very much. You've changed the screen, and now you see an entering screen that was the International Academy for the Nuremberg Principles so friendly to provide, and that had created a link on our site. And you can see here my cursor. I'm going on this button, and voila. We're inside Courtroom 600 as it looks today. A short introduction, if you, and I am explicitly inviting you to revisit this visual courtroom. A short introduction, you have here the choice between the 4 trial languages that were used at the time of the International Criminal Court. And I'm choosing English for you. This is just a short introduction how to use this tool. I'm closing it, and you can see you can maneuver with your cursor here in the courtroom. You can look to the ceiling, you can turn around, and so on. And what you see are these little dots or points here marked with an I for information. These are information dots offer you the opportunity to obtain some information and also to see photographs and historic footage from the time of 1945 to 1949 that illustrates you how this courtroom was used, how this courtroom looked like during the Nuremberg trials, and how different parts of the courtroom were used to conduct these trials. This was not very easy. It was a challenge to use this courtroom. If you imagine that there were 4 languages used during the trial, defendants and their counsels speaking German, prosecutors and judges that spoke English, French, and Russian, and they all had to come together. They had to find a way to communicate with each other, and this mean of communication that was actually invented for this trial was simultaneous interpreting, and this is also the first information dot that I want to present to you. It is this very left corner of the front of the courtroom where the interpreter's booth was situated. You can see, you can click on these loops, and then shwop, here we have it, the information and the historic pictures that illustrates you how this courtroom looked like and how it was used during the time of the Nuremberg trials. And I'll start with this very left photo, because it very well illustrates how this translation procedure worked. This is the section of the interpreters, and as you can see, they're only separated from this room by these glass windows, and behind these glass windows there were 3 interpreters for every language. For example, if you had a German-speaking witness, one section, for example, for German, was responsible to translate this German testimony into English, French, and Russian at the same time, at the very time that it was given this testimony, and then was distributed to, more or less all the places in the courtroom, some 450, 500 places that were supplied with headphones and switches where you could choose one of the languages, French, Russian, German, and English, or you could use a verbatim sound channel where you would listen to the natural sound. Yeah, this is actually one of the groups, or actually the only group that was equally possessed by men and women. So you have a 50-50% relationship between men and women in this group of the interpreters. Apart from that, the rest of this historic event was more or less a very male event. So I'm closing this. I have to rearrange this. So an interesting aspect is this close-up of a technical gadget that was also invented some, we are not exactly sure, months or weeks after the trial had started. And as it became apparent that the translators were good, but not as good to follow the very fast-speaking lawyers at this trial. And so the translators, the interpreters, had the possibility to activate a yellow or a red bulb that would signify to the speaker slower or stop. I have to first finish with my interpreting. I'm going over to another section. When you enter this courtroom, or when our visitors enter this courtroom, a lot of them very, very soon realize that there is something in this courtroom which is, some would call it disturbing. And it is this huge bronze crucifix that was attached to this wall, and which is really big, way too big for this small courtroom. It was more suited into a big church or something like that. And it's confusing because people ask us, is this an original part of the courtroom? Was this part of the courtroom at the time of the Nuremberg trials? No, it was not. I can show you via this information point what was there. You can see here at the place where now the cross is, there was a booth separated from the courtroom with a plexiglass window, and behind this booth there was actually a radio broadcasting cabin. And this is one of the first very striking hints to the role that the media played during these trials, and especially during the International Military Tribunal, because it was not only an aim to more or less sentence some 20 individuals for their individual guilt, but also to send out a message to the world. And this message should include first the crime history of National Socialist, the German Reich. It should also send the message that after this violation of everything that was considered right and morally good, that this trial would send out a message that constitutional right are returning, and the right will foster the future relationship between the various nations. This was a very important message, and the media should broadcast, the press should broadcast this significant message to the rest of the world. Here you can see the inside of this radio broadcasting booth, a lot of technical equipment here also, and this is the window that allows you, I hope you can see it, to look on the gallery, on the visitors gallery of the trial. I have now shown you some of the changes that are obvious if you look at the courtroom and the state as it is now. But I think I have to first of all go into a little bit more into the details how this courtroom was changed when the Americans, when the US military discovered this place in June, July 1945. Here you have a plan of the original courtroom. This is courtroom 600 as it originally looked like. You would have here a curved bench for the judges and the prosecution, the defendant's dock, and here is the place for the representatives of the German public, the jury, that would also play an important role in the jury trials at the time before this courtroom was used by the four allies. When the four allies came, they discovered this. They discovered this justice building. It was huge. There were some hundreds of offices. There were a lot of courtrooms inside. There was also a very, very suitable prison at the back of this justice building, a prison that was the so-called cell prison, a prison designed especially to isolate one prisoner from the other. So a wonderful infrastructure for the international trial. But nevertheless, they, especially the Americans, were realizing, okay, that's a big courtroom, but it's not big enough, because we want to have the representatives of the public here. We want to have as many representatives of the press here in this very courtroom. So what they did was they were tearing out this wall here at the back of the courtroom, and then had this new layout of the courtroom. Here was the former back wall of the courtroom. Now it was expanded by this section that would, in the first floor, would have place for the press representatives. And as you can see, the balcony maybe behind me in the background picture was for the visitors of this of the trials. And so this courtroom was able to host another 400 persons, not only the legal specialists, the interpreters, the defendants, and so on, but also another 400 persons representing the public. And this was the new shape of the courtroom, and I will zoom in a little bit so that I can explain to you how it was used. This is the very interior of the courtroom, and here, the same place as before, you have the defense docket with the defense counsels in front of them. This is the interpreters section. And the place where formerly the court was is now replaced by a display panel where, for example, films and other graphic or visual evidences could be presented. And this section also hosted the witness chair. So with one word, or this is at least my interpretation, at the front of this courtroom, there was the place to significantly represent the evidence in this trial. And the judges' bench was situated here, just face to face to the defendants. You can see here some little booths that are marked here with camera booth. These booths were also separated by plexiglass windows from the courtroom in order to provide space for the film cameras, as the trial should also be filmed. And there was a total of some 35 hours of film material produced during the International Military Tribunal. So I'm closing this. And yeah, you can see here two persons of the US military intelligence who were responsible for the redesign of the courtroom. You can see here this wonderful model of the courtroom that was made in order to explain to those responsible to conduct the trial how they could maneuver in this Courtroom, and you can see that this trial was a trial that required a lot of infrastructure. It was not a non-physical undertaking, but it required a lot of manpower and a lot of technique and a lot of very, very clever solution for the various challenges that this trial imposed. So we're going back in order to show you who was tried in this first trial in the International Military Tribunal. And for that purpose, I'm showing you the defense doc. Here you can see the 21 persons tried in this first international criminal court trial, guarded by US military police. In front of them, the various defense counsels. And if you look at this doc, if you look at the persons who were tried in this International Military Tribunal, that is also called the Major War Criminals Trial, you can see a lot of representatives of the government. Here you can see Albert Speer, Minister for Ammunition and Rearmament. You can see here Frick, the Minister for the Interior. You can see here the president of the Reichsbank, of the federal bank of the German Reich. You can see here the former deputy of Adolf Hitler. You can see here the minister for the exterior, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and so on. And you can see only two members of the army, Alfred Jodl and Wilhelm Keitel, and two others who represented the Navy, Räder and Dönitz. So from these 21 accused, there were only 4 representatives of the German military. All others were representatives of the government, of the various authorities, of the party, and so on. So what this first international court was really aiming on were not a loose or more or less loosely connected series of various perpetrations of the rules of law, but it was actually the aim of this trial to systematically prosecute high-ranking representatives of a government that very systematically used a state and the various agencies and organizations of a state to commit a very systematic set of crimes that must be termed state crimes. And this is, I think, one of the most important aspects of the first trial that took place here in Nuremberg, that it was not only aiming on, excessive perpetrators of the rules of law, but it was also, or especially aiming on those who were planning, who were organizing, and this is also an aspect, who were profiting from these crimes. On this bench, there are not only high-ranking representatives of the German society, of the German state. These persons are also millionaires who have filled their pockets with the robberies that the German army and the other organizations did in the rest of Europe. So we are coming now to more or less the opponents of these defendants. We're coming to the prosecution. We're turning around 180 degrees, and now we're looking to the back of the courtroom. And I will explain to you a little bit about the prosecution. We have here 5 tables at the back of the interior of the courtroom. 5 tables that were used by the prosecution authorities and by those who were responsible for the handling of papers, documents. We have here the British prosecution, the US prosecution, the Soviet prosecution, and the French prosecution. You can see this courtroom is very cramped. It's full of people sitting in the various places of the courtroom, and yeah, you could imagine that it was yeah, not only full, but it was also quite warm. As you can see here, there is a big lamp that was used for the filming of the trial. And what you can see also on this picture are the various headphones that were used, the microphones, and so on. All this had to be supplied with electricity, all this generated heat. And so, yeah, the communication, the media reporting and so on was not the only problem. Heat was also a problem. And this is also, this is the reason why this is maybe the first courtroom that was supplied with an air condition in 1945. The various prosecution teams were, yeah, maybe we go back to this picture because I can introduce to you some of the more famous representatives of the various prosecution teams. Here at the rostrum, you can see Thomas Dodd of the US prosecution. He was, yeah, more or less the second man behind Robert H. Jackson, the US chief prosecutor. You can see here at the table of the US prosecution, Sir David Maxwell Fyfe and Sir Hartley Shawcross. Hartley Shawcross was the chief of the British prosecution, but mostly represented by Maxwell Fyfe. We have here the Soviet table with General Rudenko, who was head of the Soviet prosecution. And here at the table, you can see Monsieur Faure of the French prosecution, one of the most important prosecutors of the French prosecution team. So, and another very important aspect of this trial, I have also mentioned it, was the possibility of, yeah, inviting more or less the rest of the world. The rest of the world should be represented by visitors, but also by the press. And we can see here a little or a wonderful picture of how this situation was arranged by the architecture changes that were made. You have here this large gallery for something like 250 representatives of the press, and above of it a balcony giving place for another 150 visitors of the trial. But if you, for example, look at this picture of this balcony, most of the visitors were VIPs, high-ranking representatives of the various military governments of France, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the US. Here you have a lot of high-ranking US military representatives. There were delegations by other countries that were affected by the German aggression, and of course had a big interest in observing this trial. For example, the Netherlands, Belgium, Scandinavia, and so on. And below this gallery, below this balcony, you have the press gallery. On this picture, there are not so many famous representatives of the press, but I can assure you that there were more or less the top journalists of their times here present in Nuremberg. And not only that, there were also a lot of well-known authors and writers here, just like John Steinbeck. Rebecca West was here, the later Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Willy Brandt, who was an observer of the trial for the Scandinavian press. Yeah, this trial really was a very big media event too, and in order to provide housing for these representatives, This castle was occupied by the U.S. military and turned into a press camp. It is the castle of the little town of Stein, some 10 kilometers away from the Palace of Justice, where the press was housed and where they were supplied with everything that they would need during the time they would cover with their reporting the course of the trial. Yeah, well, maybe some of the impressions that I can give you, and maybe this made you a little appetite to come back and visit and explore this virtual courtroom on your own. I think I'm giving back the floor to Jolana, and yeah, you're invited to make commentaries and questions.
Thank you very much, Axel, and thank you also, Dr. Baumann, for the wonderful introduction. I think that this is, yes, it from our side. I think there are maybe many questions from the audience, but I think that there will be a platform for sharing them with you at the later point. Otherwise, I'll just give the floor to your reflections, whether there is anything else that you would like to maybe highlight also from the wider Palace of Justice discussions, and yeah, show anything in addition to the Courtroom 600. And I think that that would then conclude the session.
Yeah, so this gives me the opportunity to make a little bit to promote this very courtroom and the museum that we have. Yeah, in normal times, you would have been here physically. You would have had the opportunity to visit our exhibition, which is situated above Courtroom 600 in the roof of the east wing of the Palace of Justice. This is an exhibition that explains the development of international criminal law from the beginning here in Nuremberg till the founding of the International Court in The Hague, the International Criminal Law Court in The Hague. Yeah, in this courtroom is not only a place where people come and dive into history, but this is also a place where the contemporary problems of international criminal law are discussed. Normally, a lot of events that the Academy is doing would take place in this courtroom, and would, with its historical background, I can only say provide the most suitable place for the discussions around the problems, around the perspectives, around the horizons of international criminal law today. And actually, this is also our big thing that we see, that we do not try to dig a hole and throw the historic events in this hole and leave it up to the history. But what we try to show is that in this, or in the course of the events that took place here from 1945 to 1949, there were important ideas developed that affect every one of us today, and will affect us, I have the fear, more and more in the future.
Thank you very much. And thank you for providing this wonderful presentation. We are grateful for the Memorium partnership and also for allowing us to connect the virtual platform to everyone for their easy access. And yeah, then we look forward to hopefully seeing you next year in presence and showing the Courtroom 600, which really if anyone has an opportunity to come and visit, the wealth of information and the pictures and everything connected is really engaging, and it shows much more than what we are able to see in a virtual platform as such. But I think the platform really provides the great overview of how the Courtroom 600 looked and how it has developed over the years. And yes, so maybe my last question from my side would be whether you could maybe shed some light on you started talking about the prisons and how the prisons looked, and maybe some history in terms of how it remained, whether anything remained in that relation. And then I think that we can just easily conclude.
Yeah, well, the prison is actually still on the area that is used by the actual prison now. Most of the historic cell prison were torn down in the 1980s. The very prison that the defendants and also most of the witnesses were imprisoned in during the International Military Tribunal and the Nuremberg Military Tribunals, the US military trials that took place afterwards, was used till the 1990s as a prison. And then most of the parts of the prisons were left empty. New areas or new facilities were built. And yeah, now the big problem is what to do with this historic prison. It is very damaged. It's in danger to collapse within the next years. And there is maybe we should mention this. There is a movement by the Bavarian Ministry of Justice to turn the Palace of Justice and, of course, Courtroom 600, and including the prison cell, into an UNESCO World Heritage site. We will see how this will develop, but I hope that this movement will at least provide some money to save this historic building. Although there are only 2 parts of the original 5 parts of the prison still existing, I think it is worth maintaining this building. And maybe this too, for the history of prisons, or the history of dealing with prisoners. It's also quite interesting because it is the so-called Pennsylvania model. This prison is a Pennsylvania model, which is built like a panopticon. You have a central point from which you can see into each cell, this prison, this old prison that was erected in the 1860s. So that means some 40 years before the Palace of Justice was erected, represents the history of prisons that were designed especially to implement more modern ways to execute internments of people who were sentenced to prison.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you to you, Axel, and also thank you to Dr. Baumann. We look forward to staying connected and exploring more. I think there's always something new that we at least learn. And from the organizational part, we now take a break. We have a brief About Us session at 11:45, led by our senior officer for capacity building and training programs. So please join us when you have the time. Otherwise, we resume our session at 12:30 with a brief reflection on day 1 and outlook and aspirations for day 2. And then we have 3 additional panels that will address various aspects of the discussed question and try to unroll further challenges. So thank you from our end, and we look forward to seeing you in 1 hour and then later this afternoon. Thank you very much.